Hello, everybody. This is DNS, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the balance changes, as you may have seen, are coming up in the PDR. Today, I'm with my friend Tobias Zieber, aka ShoWTimE. So, thank you for being here.
Yeah, hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. We're doing it again. Of course, we're not very professional yet, but so we're not going to go in depth with all the different changes. We're going to talk about a few of them, and we want to talk about as well about how the balance cancel itself works. Of course, we cannot go exactly into details because we signed an NDA. We don't want to go to jail. But let's kick things off. So first of all, what are your first impressions about the patch?
Well, as a Protoss, you read these changes, you can't be too happy. Like, of course, we've known about these for a little longer than the public, and I wasn't happy back then, and I'm also not happy now. So, yeah, it is mostly a bit disappointed. Like, some changes I can understand, but I don't know. Overall, it just feels a bit rough if you're a Protoss.
Yeah, definitely. And I see a lot of incoherence as well in the changes. Like I've read that they want to reduce the amount of camping possible for different races. But then I see they buff spine crawlers, they buff spore crawlers, especially the damage, they buff brood lords, the liberators, man. Have you seen the circles? They are huge.
Yeah.
And overall, I don't think this is a nerf for camping. If anything, it might actually be the opposite. What do you think?
Yeah, it's from my experience, the changes and the text they write with them, they don't always go hand in hand, you know? Because I feel like a lot of changes, they are made first, and then they add the text afterwards. So I feel like some of these changes they've probably had before they even had clear goals, maybe, of what they wanted. And then afterwards, we're like, okay, we want to nerf like this and that, and they have to write some text for the public, right? So I agree that it doesn't completely match.
Yeah, they go the other way around, right? Instead of having a clear idea where they want to go, they just throw out some changes and they're like, oh, I guess it's going to do X, Y, and Z, right?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So I want to go straight into one buff, which, I don't know, not many people talked about it, but to me is mega busted. I saw Drogo was also talking about it. The Spore Crawler buff, man. So I did the math. Right now, a Spore Crawler takes 11 shots to kill an Oracle. With the new patch, it goes from 11 to 8. I think it's a very massive deal. Well, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I hate it as well. Like, Oracle openings is like our main thing in PvZ. Like, that's the opening that you see probably like 3 out of 4 games. Like 2-3 Oracles try to harass, and I feel like I get it, they nerf the queens a little bit, but then the compensation it feels like way too much. Because even right now, if I play a good Zerg, like especially Sarah, I can barely find damage with my Oracles. Maybe if I'm like willing to, sacrifice some units, like an Oracle or 2, then I can do damage. But if I try to go in and pick off something and go out again, it's almost impossible to do any damage. So now we're buffing spores like extremely hard. It's like I don't know how I'm supposed to find any damage with this, to be honest. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah, so their logic was like, Zergs are too reliant on queens, so we're gonna make queens more expensive, so they're gonna make less of them. But to me, it makes no sense. We need first to understand whether Zergs have an alternative, right? What is the alternative to queens? I mean, I don't really see any. Like, I think even if queens are slightly more expensive, they're just gonna make mass queens anywhere. I have a hard time believing Zergs, are gonna make less queens. Like, they're gonna make 6, 7, 8 like before, right? But on top of that, they still get the buff of Spore Crawlers. So to me, it's a little bit crazy. Do you think Zergs are going to make less queens, though? I don't think this is going to achieve their goals at all, personally.
I think maybe in CVT. Like in CVT, I think the normal opening is like 9 queens. So that will be quite a lot more expensive. And I guess like spores are not as, important in the defense maybe. Maybe against Banshees, I guess. But I can see them make less queens in CVT. Maybe... Like, I think like some Zergs already open roaches with less queens, so this might become like more popular. But against Protoss, like I think they will at least make 6 queens and maybe even 7, which is like just a normal amount they make anyway. So yeah, I don't think they will make less.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think in the end, like the only reliable opening Protoss has right now in PvZ is playing Oracle, right? And against very good players, especially Sarah, as you said, it's very tough to find damage. now with the new Spore, I mean, it's gonna be even more risky. Like generally speaking, sometimes you go with your first oracles or a pair of oracles to like get a few kills. But if the Spore Crawler shoots that much harder, it's gonna be even more difficult. So another change I want to talk about is the Disruptor. Of course, this one is I think you wrote something about it. So yeah, Disruptor basically will no longer one-shot Marauders, Roaches, and Ravagers. I think it matters most is in the PvT matchup with Marauders. So in the previous patch, Disruptor, so it's reduced. Nova basically got reduced in size, and Disruptor went from 3 supply to 4. But now it deals less damage. Do you think this nerf is too extreme? And do you think a Disruptor after this change will be worse for supply?
It's, I kind of understand why they want to nerf Disruptor. Like, if we could get to a game where Disruptor is not as important for Protoss, it would be better, because it is very frustrating to play against, I get it. But it just feels too extreme. Like, I think that not one-shotting Marauder and also Roaches and Ravager is a huge deal. Like, this, for example, against Zerg, it's the main reason you make this unit in the first place, to kill Roach Ravager. So I think in PvC, like, this change effectively removes it completely, and it's already rare in PvC. But now I don't think there's any reason to make it. And against Terran, I'm not really sure. Like, when I play against Clem, I barely get any hits. Like, maybe it hits now a bit more again, but it doesn't kill anything. So it doesn't gain me anything. So it's a huge nerf, and I don't really know. Like, I understand the change, as I said, but I feel like from a balance perspective, it's way too much, in my opinion. It's way too much.
Yeah, you would say it's more like a design issue rather than balance. So I think, the issue with Disruptor is like this unit is extremely punishing, and it's so annoying. Like, imagine, especially at lower leagues, right? You spend the whole game making an army, you look away for half a second, everything is gone. It's so silly. But at the same time, at the very top level, as you said, against the likes of Clem, your Disruptors basically kill anything, right? So not only it's bad at lower levels because the unit is so frustrating to play against, too punishing basically, but at top level, from the Protoss side, it's also bad because you basically lack reliability. Like, you're not even sure if your units are going to shoot. So I think, in terms of design, I don't like this unit either. But I think it might be too extreme balance-wise. I'm on the same page as you are. So I've read Reddit a little bit the last few months, and there's one unit that gets talked about all the time. It's the Ghost. It's been a major discussion, of course, in Bulgaria and in the player area. Of course, the Ghost. Funnily enough, there was nothing about the Ghost in this patch. So I understand they worked a little bit around it. They buffed like Broodlords and Hydras and so on. The radius of the Nova as well. But the unit itself hasn't been changed. What do you think? Where do you think the Ghost is in both PvZ and TvZ? You play all 3 matchups, so you can actually talk about the Ghost. What do you think?
I think versus Protoss, it's okay. Like, it's a strong unit, but it's also necessary. And it's not as completely busted as it used to be with like the upgrade that gave it like, what was it, like 2 radius or whatever. That one was completely busted. Like, now I think it's okay against Protoss. And I mean, ZVT is not my matchup. Like, I play a bit off race here and there, but in ZVT it just seems, like, from my perspective as a Protoss and someone who off race occasionally, it seems extremely strong. Like, and it's also like super frustrating to play against. So I'm surprised the Zerg players didn't like get it nerfed. Quite frankly, they usually get what they want, and somehow they didn't. From Protoss perspective, I'm okay with the Ghost the way it is right now, I would say.
Yeah, it seems fair. Like, for me, it was especially ZVT too. Like, when you start feeling empathy for Zerg players, something is wrong, right?
Yep.
So I want to talk a little bit about the main change of this patch, which is the battery overcharge change. Removal, actually, and the new spell. To me, it's a bit of a joke, honestly, to leave it like this, considering the state of the PvT of the game. So I just want to go on a small rant on the Cyclone. Remember, in the previous patch, they completely reworked the Cyclone in a way that the unit would be viable to make mech a standard playstyle. The Cyclone would be a core unit. And I think it's fair to say that this goal hasn't been met. Like it has failed tremendously. Like mech is still shit, right? I think I'm not sure what you think. I think mech is pretty bad in PvT.
Yeah, pretty much.
But it made PvT early game worse than before, and especially I know you used to like to play Oracle a little bit. I think Oracle openings are nowhere near as good as before. I would even argue they're quite dead. I think Phoenix is way worse than it used to be before. So not only the Cyclone failed his goal to actually make mech better, but it also ruined the PvT early game. And now we have no overcharge. And as much as you can restore 100 energy on one unit, realistically, like you're not gonna give 100 energy to a Phoenix. It's not like you can lift 3 units at once and the Phoenix is gonna get targeted. Even the same with an Oracle, right? You're gonna put stasis traps everywhere. I don't think I think this changed way too extreme for PvT early game. I think it's a bit extreme as well. The fact that the Cyclone is left untouched, considering the fact that it removed overcharge. What's your take on PvT early game and the Cyclone?
Well, yeah, I used to quite like Oracle openings. These days, I rarely play them. It's kind of pointless when a unit the cost of a Stalker can defend my harassment or my, I don't know. It's just like it's so easy to defend, and then not only can they defend very easily, they can also attack very easily. So playing Stargate feels not great these days. I mean, I've switched almost entirely to playing Blink these days, maybe sometimes Robo even. And Stargate is like, if I'm forced to play Stargate, which in some situations you are, then I play it, but I would rather avoid playing Stargate these days. And it's like, I don't know. The Cyclone is just like, sometimes it feels really dumb to play against, and sometimes it feels kind of weak as well. Though, which is, I don't know, it's very strange the way the Cyclone is. And with the removal of overcharge, like I can see Stargate openings probably struggling more, like even more than already. But yeah, I don't know. I think removing overcharge, I can kind of get behind it. I think there's potential with the energy recharge. It's probably much worse in some situations, but I don't know. I don't mind them removing the overcharge, actually. I think that there's potential with the energy recharge, and it's going to be interesting to at least work on some builds, some early century builds against Terran. I think you can scout very easily. You also have, like, you can basically send in hallucination and then you still have a guardian shield or whatever. Like, I think it might be fine. I'm not really sure. It's very hard to say.
Yeah, like the thing is, most of the time when you play like Blink opening, for example, you're a bit short in gas, so you don't really make sentries. But if you open right off the bat with a sentry, I can see that working too. So of course it's just a PTR, right? So the numbers are gonna change. Like I think right now 1 minute cooldown on the energy thing and 50 energies might be a bit too much, but then again the numbers might change in the future. I remember Kevin Dong, aka Monk, which is now a guy working for Stormgate. He used to take care of the balance back in the days. And I remember having an argument with him. We're talking like 2018, maybe in Austin, DreamHack Austin. And I remember he said community perception is very important, more than actual pro players. And I remember disagreeing very much with him, but it feels like these days, I'm going back on that statement and thinking maybe he was right. What do you think community perception is very important when it comes to balancing a game? What do you think?
I think as a pro player, it's hard to say, because I mean, of course, like right now, community perception is kind of that Protoss is bad. So it's, in this case, it's good for me, because if we listen to community, then we would buff Protoss. But I don't know. I think community is oftentimes wrong. Like even right now, it's like Protoss is performing badly at the highest level, like for sure. But I also don't think that Protoss is like super bad. It's just like a little bit worse than the other two races. And then if you go like slightly lower in level, I'd say like GM or maybe even Master, then Protoss is really not struggling. I would say the opposite, actually. So I mean, as a pro player, I prefer listening more to what other pro players think and the highest level of tournaments, and look at that for balancing rather than community perception. But of course, I mean, we can't go on without the community. So if they all have concerns about certain things, then we should listen to them. And then the Balance Council has, right? Like the Widowmine nerf, for example, there was less a pro player nerfed and the community being upset about widow mines. So it's both is important. Yeah, you should listen to community in certain ways, but also I think pro player input is also important.
Yeah, because I feel like we should be happy that the game is still alive almost 15 years after its release, right? When I watch Story Cup and I see like the donation goal is met within minutes, like you can see the community is really passionate about the game. They really love the game, and I feel like they're being a bit left out. When I read a lot of Reddit these days, Team Liquid as well, and it feels like the community is left out. Like people don't really listen to them too much. Like the balance council, they just do their thing. In their corner, they don't really care too much what people say, because people have been very vocal towards almost the last 2 years about Protoss struggling at the highest level, and of course the Ghost and so on. And it feels like nothing really happens. Like, of course, there's a trade-off. Maybe something is better, something is a bit worse. But overall, when I read those patches, I don't tell myself, okay, Hero is definitely gonna win a tournament, right? What do you think?
Yeah, for sure not. I mean, this patch, you read it and you like, it's almost certainly like a big nerf to Protoss, which is, yeah, it goes against what you would expect, kind of, right? I kind of thought that, okay, if we have another patch, I don't think we get buffed, because, as I said, like Protoss is not that bad. Like, of course, it would be nice if we got buffed, but I didn't expect it. But I also didn't expect to get get hit this hard. I thought maybe we get away with like a 50-50 patch. Maybe we get a little bit help here. Maybe they take some stuff away from us there. But yeah, I don't know. It's rough. It's rough.
Yeah, it's very rough indeed. Yeah, I want to talk about another change, the Tempest. Of course, you and I, we like playing late game. And yeah, I think Tempest was basically not very made these days. Like, I think in PvZ, you had like an actual use in certain scenarios, late game, against Lurker and so on. Like, I would make them at least. But in PvT, realistically, the unit was, too fragile. I mean, also doesn't really fit in the current metagame, in which like you play 80 probes, you expand like mad, you move around the map. The Tempest doesn't really fit in that metagame. Now the Tempest is gonna go back to 4 supply. It used to be 5, now it's gonna be 4 again. It's gonna be a bit better to micro her. Like the damage point thing is actually micro ability. But the range is gonna be down -1. So I think it's gonna, like, they're targeting the Liberator as well. The circle is gonna be much bigger. So basically, I think the intent of the Balance Council is to have us make Liberators against, make Tempest against Liberators. Do you think it's gonna fit in well in the current playstyle? Do you think it's gonna work just fine?
I like the Tempest change. I think it's overall a buff. Like, 1 less supply is, I think it's a big deal. Like, if you make like 5, 6, 7 Tempest, that's quite a bit of supply that we have left for other stuff. So I think it's a good change overall. I don't know if it's gonna work in PvT. It's for sure a buff, but it's very hard to say, because, as I said, like, we play like a very crown-centric style, like low gas mostly, and a lot of expanding. And Tempest are just, it's hard to use them in like that way where it fits in, because if you make Tempest, you want mass static defense, you want Storm, you kind of sit back and you pick off stuff, which is it's hard to make work with like how we are approaching the matchup currently. But we'll see. Like, I think the Liberator change, which makes the circle absolutely gigantic, I feel like you kind of have to make Tempest, because I don't really see myself outmaneuvering like the Liberator with the huge circle now. So I hope it works, but I'm not confident.
Yeah, actually, I had prepared a couple of pictures of the Liberators, but since I'm the worst YouTuber out there, I have no idea how to put that on screen without crashing ShoWTimE's camera. So maybe editing DLS would actually take care of this and show beautiful circles, because yeah, it's massive. It's like, I was surprised. It's actually huge. I don't even know if you can realistically maneuver around it with Blinkstalkers, but then again, it's a bit silly that you can just walk around it too. Like, I think the purpose of the unit is kind of to lock a position. Like, I don't know what you think about that. I think the interaction was first meant to have like Tempest versus Liberator, so it kind of makes sense. Now, is it gonna work in the current metagame? Then we'll see about that.
I mean, for me personally, like, I was hoping for a Liberator nerf, you know. I really strongly hate Liberator, and I think it's too strong right now in the late game. Like Terran cost efficiency is completely crazy to me. And the fact that this is most likely a buff is just crazy to me. Like it's complete opposite of what I would have thought would happen. Especially since we're nerfing Protoss so hard in like the early game and the mid game. I thought that, okay, surely you're the late game where Protoss has been struggling for quite some time now. Like surely we get something there, you know? And then boom, Liberator, and it's like freaking huge circle that covers everything. I really hate it because one of the downsides of Liberator is that you need quite a few to cover all the space, right? But now with the huge circle, you can basically cover even huge chokes with like one Liberator, and you can stack them all on top of each other, meaning that if you go in there, you're gonna get absolutely wrecked. So, I don't know, like, probably I'm the most triggered about the Liberator change, actually, about all of these.
Yeah, this one is actually pretty insane, especially with EMP. Like, imagine you blink on top of it. There's like maybe just 4 of them with +2, and just Stalkers just get obliterated. It is what it is, my friend, is what it is. So yeah, last part of this video, I want to talk about the balance cancel itself. So of course, as I said, we signed an ADA, both of us, so we cannot really talk about what's going on inside of it or like what's being said exactly. But yeah, like I've had like talks with you guys in Bulgaria. I remember talking with the ESL guy in Atlanta as well. We had discussions here and there, like plenty of talks. I shared a meal with Rainer as well. We talk about balance and so on. My main issue is that, first of all, I'm not sure if pro gamers should take care of this. The thing is, we are the ones who know the game best, but then we are the ones who have the biggest conflict of interest. And I think Scarlett is the only one who's legitimate in my eyes to do this job because she's done this job in the past. She's working with Zero Space as well, right, in terms of balance and designing the game. So she actually knows what to do. People will say she might be biased and so on. Maybe, but at least she has the competence to do it. Do you think pro players should balance the game? Do you think pro players should have the final words to actually make changes in the game?
Ideally, they should not balance the game. I mean, first of all, a lot of us put a lot of effort into these patches, and we don't get paid for that, right? Like I was working quite a lot on one of the patches, not the one we have now, but one of the maybe like 2 patches ago, and like we're talking like legit like meetings where like you can discuss stuff of like an hour or 2 per week over the course of like months, right? So it's a lot of work that goes into these, and we don't get paid for it, which obviously it kind of sucks for us. And yeah, there is definitely sort of like a conflict in interest because everyone wants to win tournaments. Everyone wants their race to be strong. So we all want the best for our race, even if it's maybe unreasonable even. And I feel like there's very few people, and I include myself in this, who have kind of like the best interest in mind, you know, but like you're fighting, or you want changes that are good for the game, that are balanced. You're like, you want to have all 3 races be equally good. I feel like not a lot of people really like want that because everyone is biased, and it makes total sense, right? I mean, I want to win a tournament. I want pros to be good. So obviously I'm going to fight for changes, or I'm going to block changes or deny changes maybe, or try to at least, that are bad for my race. So like everyone wants that, and it's definitely not ideal, but I mean, what can you do? Like it's the best we have right now, and we have to make it work somehow.
Yeah, as you said, like that's the thing, right? If you have the pie in the middle of the table and some people are willing to share equally, but some others like, no, I want like half of it, then you know who's going to win in the end, right? That's the issue. It's more like a tug of war, right? And if you have a guy willing to let go a little bit of the rope and the other guy's like pulling as hard as he can towards him, well, the other guy's going to left with basically nothing. And that's the thing, is the matter of character as well. You know, if you have like some very strong characters fighting their heart out and are as humanly biased as you can imagine towards them, and then you have somebody on the other side who's reasonable, the reasonable guy is getting completely screwed, right? And I'll be honest, I think I cannot say who it is, but the last people we had as far as pros goes in the balance cancel haven't been the most strong, like crazy guy, fighting for us. Like if you had like a Drogo, for example, or myself, we're gonna be like baboons fighting for the changes, right? We're gonna go hard. But if you're trying to be reasonable, as you said, well, you try to be nice, you try to share the cake, and then you just get screwed.
Yeah. You have, like, it's really not a good situation, but that's kind of how it is, right? You have to be, like, you have to be as biased as possible without it being ridiculous or too obvious, Like, it's a lot of politics, I feel like.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a lot like politics. The thing is, you should have the referee, like the ESL guy, or even maybe we could have multiple people doing this. But then again, there's the matter of getting people paid, as you said. Like it's not like you're gonna spend 3 or 4 months balancing a game for free, right? You have a life. But that referee also needs to take everything in consideration, have a good knowledge of the game. And I think I've talked with this guy, at least in Atlanta 2 years ago. And okay, this is going to be a controversy, but I think he had at least a small bias against Protoss. That's my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what's your opinion, but I think he had a little bias against Protoss.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, see, I'm not completely crazy. So another issue also I wanted to talk about, there were players as well that were not so much focused on improving the game as a whole, like saying, okay, there's an issue regarding, let's say, the Widowmine, the Ghost, the Disruptor, whatever, and we're going to try to work on that. But rather players trying to drag the changes towards their own playstyle, right? Say, oh, I like to play, let's say, late game. I'm going to do everything I can to buff the late game. But you're not really buffing your race. You're buffing yourself, kind of. And I've seen changes go by, who is behind the idea, right? This motherfucker wants to buff his own playstyle, right? Are you on the same page?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I think we're probably all guilty of that a little bit. It's like you just sneak in some changes that, they might be good for me, But yeah. I mean, it for sure happens. It for sure happens, yeah.
Honestly, if we have pro gamers being part of it, I would rather have, players of each race being mega biased and then someone in the middle try to take all the ideas together and make like something more reasonable, rather than have people trying to be nice on one side and the others are a bit more crazy, and then we end up with a patch like this where at first glance I think Protoss is getting screwed. And another thing I want to talk about is the negotiation aspect of the balance cancel. It's more like, okay, I'm the seller, you're the buyer. I want to pay as little as possible, and you want to make as much money as possible, and we're gonna try to find a middle ground. The thing is, if you have a race like Protoss, who's performing by far the worst in tournaments, you can't really find an agreement. You're gonna have to, as a Zerg or Terran, you're gonna have to make a sacrifice, right, so that the other race is more valid or viable at the higher level. But it's never going to happen, because if you say, oh, we need to straight up buff this about Protoss, it's never going to happen, because the other races are going to strongly veto that. And then the referee, like the ESL guy, needs to say, oh, I really think we need to strongly buff this aspect of this unit of Protoss. But it's just never going to happen. And I think this never-ending 50-50 trades, if you have a race there and the other race there, it's just going to stay like this all the time, right? Sometimes you need to make like bold decisions and straight up buff or nerf something, right?
Yeah, I think it's why we end up with like a lot of like design changes more than balance. Like I feel like a lot of changes we did, they're like, okay, this is frustrating, let's nerf it or let's change it. And of course that is, from a balance perspective, like it can be a nerf or it can be a buff, whatever. But it's not always with the balance in mind in like the first place, It's more like, okay, this unit is frustrating, let's nerf it, which can be good or can be bad depending on what race you are. And it is a balance change at the end of the day, but it's not the main focus of it. It's more like, it's really more like the design, and then the balance comes second, sometimes with a lot of changes, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. And there's another thing I want to say, a bit controversial too, but I think it needs to be said because nobody has said it. I do believe that not everybody's voice weigh the same, right? If you have somebody who's famous, who's doing very well, who's a champion, whatever, he brings arguments, and then there's somebody else who's, maybe not as good, still a pro gamer, obviously, who brings opinions there are lots of replays, evidence-based and rational. If the famous guy doesn't like it, you're screwed. It's never going to go through, right? Do you also believe that some people have more influence than others in terms of balance?
Yeah, for sure. It's a higher level players are like naturally gonna be listened to more. I think it's logical in a way, but of course it's also if you're maybe like a lower tier pro and you're in the balance council and you make arguments and people just laugh at you or whatever, it can be a bit rough, I would imagine. So that there is definitely like bias towards like higher level players.
Yeah, I would even argue that even in the realm of top players, some players have even more influence than others. Well, I'm not gonna say any names, but I think there's a certain Terran player that has a very, very big impact. That's how I see it. Maybe I'm wrong, but at least this is what I've noticed at least a year and a half ago when I was in Atlanta. Some players have very, very strong influence on the balance more than others. Even if you bring rational facts and evidence and stats, if some guys don't like the change, it's never gonna work. It's just the way it is.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to close this out. Any final words you want to say regarding this patch? Are you overall? You said at the beginning you're pretty sad, obviously, like we all are. If there are maybe changes you want to revert, or are there any changes you want to revert? Any things you want to change? What will you do?
I think a lot of the changes in isolation are okay, but if you take the whole package, it just feels it feels just too much, Where like you remove overcharge, and I'm like, as I said, I'm okay with it. You give us something else, the energy recharge. But I feel like in a lot of situations, it's a huge nerf. Like that impacts early game, mid game, late game. And then you take on top of it the Disruptor nerf, and you also give a Liberator buff, and then you give a bunch of buff to Zerg. And it's like the whole package just feels too insane. So, like, for example, if they, let's say, don't do the Liberator stuff and the Disruptor stuff, I would already be a lot... I don't want to say happy, but I would be happier at least with the patch. So if they removed like some stuff or maybe they tweaked some numbers, I would find this patch more reasonable.
Yeah, because to me the first things that just first come up to my mind, obviously PvZ early game, the Zergs are still gonna make queens, right? So and the Spore Crawler is gonna be maybe a bit too good. I think the DPS increase is a bit too much to me. That's the first one. We'll have to see the interaction between Tempest and Liberators. Once again, we didn't play much on that PTR ourselves, so we need time, of course, to actually see how it works. But I would say the ability, the recharge 100 energy, I think is 1 minute cooldown. 1 minute feels pretty long, and 50 energy, so as much as Conrus. Don't you agree it's a bit too much in terms of cooldown and energy cost?
I'm not sure. Like giving 100 energy to a unit is pretty powerful, I think, per minute. Of course, it depends on the unit. But let's say you have High Templar, and like every minute you give High Templar 100 energy, I feel like it's pretty strong. I mean, I haven't tried it a whole lot, but it's I don't know. I feel like we just have to wait and see. As I really feel like the energy overcharge or recharge, or whatever it's called, is a bit underrated right now.
Mm-hmm. Then again, it's very situational. I think my main concern would be more like PvT early game, where you don't even have Templars, right? Like those tank pushes, you gotta see, like, I think Immortals, so Artosis talk about it, I think Immortals lose a 10% DPS because of the reduced attack speed. For 25 minerals cheaper, it's not like it's that big of a deal, but I guess it's back to where it used to be. But without overcharge, I think, for example, tank pushes and stuff like that could be harder to defend. It's not like, I mean, against tank push, do you realistically need a sentry? I mean, maybe you have a Guardian Shield, but you probably would have the energy anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, the hope in versus that stuff is you open sentry, you get an early scout, and then you can react better, maybe, you know. But I agree, like tank pushes is like recharging a sentry's energy. Like, okay, you can scout, which is nice. You have guardian shield, which is nice. But if we're talking like buying time, it's gonna be super map dependent because some maps, okay, maybe you can force field off and like you give essentially 100 energy and has 3 force fields immediately. Maybe you can force field the push off and you buy more time. That could be good, but that is so like map dependent. You know, like some maps you can probably just walk around the force fields or whatever, or the map is simply has too big of a choke to force field the army off. So like I think in some situations the energy recharge is going to be really cool and very strong, but then in other situations, in comparison to the overcharge, like shield battery overcharge, is going to be quite weak, I would imagine. Same versus Zerg. Like if I get Roach Ravage all in, like what am I going to recharge? You know, like a sentry and then it gets spiled immediately the force fields or what? Like it's going to be pretty weak. But yeah, again, it's a lot more situational. It's not as overall strong as the overcharge.
Yeah, you got to take into consideration that the battery itself is going to have like 100 more hit points in total, like 50 health and 50 energy shield, I believe. I can totally see like having to recharge an Oracle at home and then you have infinite energy basically to defend links. That could be pretty useful. I think link floods are maybe going to be completely dead after this. I mean, they were pretty dead already. Like the battery itself is already pretty good, but yeah, my main concern is really PvT early game. Like we're already struggling a little bit. Like the thing is, we lack variety. That's the main issue. I think Terran can do so many things right now. I think you've complained about it in the past. Like Terrans can really do a whole bunch of stuff. Whereas Protoss is much like you go 2, 3, 4 gate blink, or sometimes Phoenix. And I think this change is gonna make Stargate even worse. So in terms of variety of build orders, we're not necessarily going in the right direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like I like Stargate, because you just don't have the gas to really make a sentry, is gonna be a lot less strong. Like if you play Phoenix into Colossus, for example, you're mostly defending with like an Immortal, Phoenix, some Adepts, maybe Stalker or whatever. And in that case, it's gonna be for sure much worse. So yeah, I could see Stargate becoming even less popular, which I don't know. It makes the game a bit more boring if you have to, or if you're forced to open Blink almost every game or whatever.
Yeah, I think what Protoss lacked the most maybe is a form of reliability so that we could play a whole bunch of stuff. Like we rely way too much on the Oracle, right? Like remember back in the days we'd open Glaives and stuff like that because the Mothership Core, as dumb as it was, brought some kind of stability, right? So we could play different builds. Now we're just so dependent on the Oracle in PvZ, and it feels like because of the Cyclone in PvT, kind of forced into Blink. The thing is, if the Terran knows you're going Blink or Robo, which is the same from their perspective because they're going to go probably Widowmine or Hellion, something like that, into, I don't know, Raven or Banshee, something like this, it gives them so much freedom to do a bit more what they want. And I'm not sure we're going in the right direction in terms of build order variety, at least.
Yeah, I can agree with that, yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm reading my little paper here. Yeah, I'm doing it the old school way. I'm pretty sure I said everything that I wanted to talk about. Anything you want to say? Any shout out? Any final words?
Not much really. Just thanks for having me. Good talk. A little bit of whining here and there. That's good, I guess. And yeah, let's hope we just get some changes here and there for the patch, and maybe it will be all right, you know.
Maybe we'll be all right. Well, thank you very much for being there, for saying yes. And once again, you're streaming very frequently. So if you guys want to watch ShoWTimE, then you know where to find him. Thank you very much for being here, Tobias, and we'll see each other around.
Yep, thank you. Bye-bye.